intermediaries. They must act in your best interest, always. The relationship they have with you will be based on transparency and trust. And they are committed to bringing you advice that fits your values. That's why Charles Schwab is proud to support them. Visit findyourindependentadvisor.com.
Bloomberg readers are incredibly busy people during the week. That's why we're introducing our new weekend edition, to help our readers find more time to think and to let their thoughts travel further. We want to zoom out and look at not just the economy, but life and culture through a Bloomberg lens, to help our readers step back and see further ahead. I'm Catherine Bell, Executive Editor of Bloomberg's Weekend Edition. Explore Bloomberg's Weekend Edition on the Bloomberg mobile app. Download on the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Tom McKenzie.
Now, the governments around the world facing mounting financial pressures. My next guest says artificial intelligence can offer agile and efficient solutions. I'm joined now by Chanel Daniels, co-founder and general partner at Target Global. He has not been someone who looked blindly into AI often unbelievable. Raised question marks and raised critiques or came out with the board.
We chose to focus on frontline workers and the people really in the edge of the system. It's not necessarily that we're advocating giving decision-making in healthcare or in policing to AI. I think there's more of a debate that's needed before you do that.
There's some obvious examples that were flagged through this report that stand out.
We spent the last 20 years obsessed about data. About data collection, data entry, and about software. And we've taken the jobs of a lot of these frontline workers that used to be facing a human and put them in front of a computer for a big part of their day. And that's made their job harder. It's made their job less interesting. And it's added on to their workload. And you can take that entire piece of their job and just automate it. And you will solve not only for the shortfall in people, but you can also solve for the churn in those jobs.
Hear more conversations like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
7:53 a.m. in the City of London. Very good morning. I'm Caroline Hepker. Looking at the market, French bond spreads over German yields actually have moved very little given the uncertainty that France now faces, having lost the government, Michel Barnier having voted out in the no-confidence vote last night. We've now trading at 84 basis points in terms of the yield spread between French and German 10-year yield. As for the rest of the markets, again, euro trading fairly steadily overnight, so we don't have to be at a crisis point in markets, despite the politics, the euro trading 1.0532, about 0.2%. Stock futures then for Europe are down 10%. CAC futures a little bit lower though, down by about 0.25%, although the S&P 500 index is down, and yet we did see yet again another record high, 56th record high for the S&P 500 yesterday. Powell talking about the economy being in remarkably good shape, yet the bill support, of course, tomorrow and the December rate decision, and 10-year US Treasury yields this morning trading at 4.19, up a basis point. OPEC Plus meets today too, with fresh records being set in terms of US oil output. Brent futures trading at $72.33 are flat. The Bloomberg Gold Spot Index is down a tenth of 1%. Now Bitcoin trades at $102,477, having powered through 100,000 yesterday. Those are the markets this hour.
We're just a few minutes away from the cash open here in Europe. Let's check in on some of the stories our colleagues on the Markets Today live page are following today. Simon Stephan is in the studio. If you don't mind, Sam, I want to start with what's French Ishan order. Well, look, you're looking at the CAC up on is expected to open down 0.25%. FTSE 100 futures down 0.2%. How are UK companies with French or European exposure likely to cope with this political collapse?
Well, I think in terms of the UK, I think rather than looking at it from kind of individual companies, it's more of a kind of broader view. So over the course of this year, you will have heard, I'm sure, many times, people saying UK stocks are attractive because they're super cheap. But the part of the reason for that as well is that on a relative basis, there's the political political picture here is a bit more stable. This only adds to that. This was something we were talking about when the French elections first happened earlier this year. 3 months later, everything kind of got back into turmoil again. And then we've also got German elections coming up next year. So as we move into next year, and also of course with the US, there's a lot of uncertainty about what may or may not happen there. It gives that little bit of a boost to that story about the FTSE 100. Though it's worth saying that we've had a year of quite a bit of political instability in the FTSE 100. That's not really that much.
It's funny because I speak to government reporters who are tearing their hair out at how boring the stock market is, don't listen to announce anything, but as you say, it's actually quite welcome when it comes to the market.
Well, although it's announced quite a lot of reviews and consultations, yes. Well, I'm not sure that anyone should be celebrating kind of bad news across Europe, but anyway, in terms of what else we're thinking about, I mentioned oil. The OPEC Plus meeting is really interesting because it is just staggering how much the US is increasing and managing to continue to increase. For example, its oil sands output. We've also got some consolidation in the oil and gas sector that's of interest in the UK.
Yeah, this is specifically for the UK. So Shell and Equinor, the Norwegian oil and gas company, they are going to combine their North Sea assets. So this is going to create the largest independent producer in the North Sea. This is a pattern you've seen happen quite a lot over the last couple of years, almost entirely driven by, partly by the North Sea kind of diminishing the amount of oil that's there, but also by the taxes that have been put on North Sea oil profits. And so in order to continue making reasonable returns from that, companies have been sizing up. So other North Sea oil producers as well have been combining and been merging merging their assets. Other oil majors have taken their UK assets and merged it elsewhere. So it's a sort of another part of that picture, but this is the largest one because these two companies together will create the largest producer in that region.
All right, and just in terms of stocks we might be watching at the open, the results of course from Fraser's top line.
Yeah, quite all. So it's a bit of a complicated picture of Fraser. So they've cut their profit guidance a little bit. Some of that they blame on the budget, on consumer confidence going down around the budget. Haven't seen that really show through for performance number of retailers, so there's some push. But another thing to note is that this is a company that is a kind of consolidator, so they buy up a lot of companies, often companies that have kind of gone under or very close to administration, and then they kind of try to fix them and integrate them into the group. And so some of the reason that their revenue has gone down is because they've been shutting branches, they've been sort of for what they call right-sizing the different businesses, and so revenue kind of naturally goes down because of that. But overall, still, their guidance has been cut, so I would expect their shares to come under a bit of pressure today. And also worth noting as well that this is coming a day after Fraser's has been demoted from the FTSE 100.
Okay, good stuff, Sam. Thank you very much for being with us this morning with all the stories you need to know about and the latest stock news that we're expecting in the UK market. You can find it all on the Markets Today live page at bloomberg.co.uk or by typing TLIV on the Bloomberg terminal. We'll be turning our attention though back to France the next hour at Bloomberg Radio. The first Prime Minister to be ousted in 60 years to lose a no confidence vote. That's Michel Barnier last night.
It is historic. We've of course got Stephen Carroll on the ground in Paris for us, covering every breaking moment of this story. As we inch towards the cash open though, we are looking at Euro Stocks 50 futures weaker at 10%, FTSE 100 futures down 2%, and the CAC 1 futures down 3%.
First, the French government falls after no confidence vote in Parliament.
Can the Prime Minister leave in order to get his budget passed and fully under the month?
Emmanuel Macron has brushed off any suggestion that he will resign. There's no budget. It's not like in the US. There's no shutdown. If it does become a political crisis, or if it spills over to the rest of Europe, that would become much more intense. Continuing coverage and complete analysis on Bloomberg.com. Context changes everything. Live from the financial capital of the world, broadcasting across the globe. This is WBBR New York, Bloomberg Montreal.
This is Bloomberg Daybreaker for this Thursday, the 5th of December, coming up today.
We're live in Paris, where French President Emmanuel Macron faces a deepening crisis after his government was toppled last night. A far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, sees her political star rise. The EU's second largest economy could face months of political paralysis as bond markets are taking note.
And in other news, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has been shot dead in New York, with the perpetrator still at large.
Plus, topping 100,000
financial regulator.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 92.9 Boston, Sirius XM Channel 121, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker, and I'm Lizzie Burbank.
And live in Paris, I'm Stephen Carroll. You're listening to Daybreak Europe. We're following the latest from a whirlwind 24 hours in French politics. Who will Emmanuel Macron name as his prime minister? And will it be enough to save his presidency?
We'll have more from Stephen Cowley in just a moment on that story. First, though, let's check in on the markets just beginning to trade here in Europe. So the CAC 40 at the open is down a tenth, almost 0.2%. The overall US stock 600, though, is flat. This, as we saw earlier, the yield spread between French and German yields not moving particularly. Currently sitting at 83.7 in terms of that 10-year Oaks-to-Bulls yield spread. As for the markets in the US, we had a fresh record high for the S&P 500 yesterday, although S&P 500 EU futures are in the red. Bitcoin powered through $100,000 yesterday, we now trade at 102,500. The dollar spot index is down 0.2% this morning, and 10-year US Treasury yields are trading currently at 4.19. There's the markets.
Let's get to our top stories now. French President Emmanuel Macron is this morning seeking a new Prime Minister after the government of Michel Barnier was toppled by a no-confidence vote. Whoever replaces Barnier, however, will face the same difficulty of building support in the National Assembly and passing a budget that brings the country's deficit under control. Speaking ahead of the votes, Michel Barnier defended his plan, which contains 60 billion euros in tax hikes and spending cuts. Here are his words, spoken by a translator.
60 billion in interest, which the French people will have to pay every year, which is higher than our defense budget or our higher education budget, and it will certainly get even bigger if we do nothing.
Barnier was ousted after a left-wing coalition teamed up with far-right leader Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party to pass the no-confidence motion. She says the budget is not what the public voted for.
Public expenditures that the public is not in favor of. We are going to take this all away because the only response we have is just taxes.
Marine Le Pen's there speaking through a translator. The result of the vote, while expected, pitches the country into a period of turbulence that's likely to further upset investors.
Well, traders are now weighing on ahead for the euro. Simon Koenig of Barclays says that events can only be considered a headwind for the currency. French borrowing costs relative to Germany's have soared in recent weeks, with the spread hitting the widest since the euro area debt crisis, though steady this morning. And European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde is now calling on the European Union to ramp up efforts to unify its fragmented financial infrastructure. Writing in The Economist ahead of the French vote, Lagarde said Europe must refocus, exposing key blockages in the financing pipeline and identifying a smaller number of solutions with the highest return.
In other news this morning, Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot dead in Manhattan on Wednesday morning. The 50-year-old was one of United Health's most senior executives and was outside the New York Hilton Midtown where the company was hosting its Investor Day. The suspect fired multiple times before fleeing, prompting an ongoing manhunt. Here's New York Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch.
I want to be clear. At this time, every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack.
Jessica Tisch speaking there as police offered a $10,000 reward for tips. According to the New York Police Department, Brian Thompson arrived in New York on Monday and didn't travel with a security detail. In a phone call with NBC News, his wife said he could be receiving threats.
Now, Bitcoin has surged to a record of more than $100,000. This after Donald Trump picked crypto proponent Paul Atkins as the next head of the US securities regulator. The digital asset rose as much as 6.1% after the announcement that Atkins would replace Gary Gensler, who cracked down on digital assets. Nathan Dean, senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, said the pick will bring significant change.
This is the first time that they've really had somebody in the regulatory repertoire, if you will, that's going to be thinking of the crypto world. And so,
Commissioner Atkins, because he used to be a commissioner at the SEC, he's actually come out and has done a lot of work in the crypto space. But where we're going with this is that, the SEC chair has a really important role because they put out a ruling, giving a little bit more of the color of, okay, here are one of the rules for crypto, meaning if you have a security and you are an exchange like Coinbase, here's how you operate.
Nathan Dean from Bloomberg Intelligence speaking there. The crypto market has jumped by roughly $1.3 trillion since Trump's election victory, with Bitcoin ETFs attracting a net inflow of about $32 billion.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says he expects to have good relations with the incoming Trump administration. Speaking at the New York Times Deal Book Summit, the central banker downplayed the prospects of tension with the president-elect.
There's a set of institutional relationships between the Fed and every administration. I fully expect that we'll have the same general kinds of relationships that we have, institutional relationships, for example, with the Council of Economic Advisors, but most importantly with the Treasury Department.
Jerome Powell speaking in New York. Turning to economic matters, he added that he expects Fed officials to move cautiously as they continue cutting rates, but he says the economy is in remarkably good shape. His comments come as US stocks hit all-time highs after a rally in big tech, which drove the S&P 500 to its 56th closing record of 2024.
Now, the CEO of Lloyds Bank has warned that the uncertainty around motor financing and selling is affecting investor confidence in British banking. Charlie Nunn says investors have raised worries about the UK's lengthy review of car finance after a court ruling that could significantly broaden its scope. From the pros, the Financial Conduct Authority is considering giving lenders more time to respond to customer complaints about fixed commissions on auto loans. Lloyds, the biggest provider of car finance, has already set aside £450 million to pay for possible compensation and other costs linked to the investigation, which Moody's estimates could cost the industry overall £20 billion.
Well, those are your top stories this morning. On the markets, as the European cash trade gets going, the stock 600 is flat to the upside, the FTSE 100 is flat to the downside, and on Wall Street, S&P E-mini futures are also flat to the downside. Not much doing, Caroline, this morning.
No, but it's politics and the risks there that markets are watching closely now. Emmanuel Macron faces a deepening political crisis after the no-confidence vote backed by Marine National Rally and others in Parliament managed to topple the government led by Prime Minister Michel Barnier. Let's go live now to Stephen Carroll, who's been following all of this for us in Paris. Stephen, good morning. So Barnier is going to play out, but we know little about what may come next. What might be happening today and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, it's a wet and grey morning in Paris, but just about coming up behind the Opera building here in the centre of Paris, and that's, not a bad comparison to the political environment. Things are very unclear at this moment. We're waiting for this national address from Emmanuel Macron a little bit later on, but there's no clear way forward from here. Michel Barnier was brought in with his legendary negotiation skills to try and bring together Parliament to be able to pass a budget. He failed, and the question turns now to who could possibly succeed him. This as investors are watching closely what's happening as well. I'm just looking at the latest commentary out of the Moody's ratings agency talking about the fall of the Barnier government deepening the country's political stalemate and also contributing to a higher of debt as well, saying that this complicates policy making in France. Perhaps an understatement for those who are involved in it, given how difficult things have been in recent months as well. I want to discuss this, at least as they were joined this morning by the Socialist Party Senator Alain Conway-Mouret, and the French Citizens Living Abroad, and the former Minister under President François Hollande. Good morning, Senator. Thank you very much for being with us on Bloomberg Radio. How big a crisis is this? The President of the National Assembly, Pierre Bourguignon, saying this morning this is a collective failure of politicians.
And good morning to you. Yes, indeed, but I think, there's always a good side to any crisis. And this is a political crisis, it's not a financial one. We have a political crisis because we have, the first time in the National Assembly, 3 blocks. And obviously, the fall of Michel Barnier was quite predictable insofar as when 2 blocks come together, of course, you get a majority. And I think Michel Barnier, when he got the hopes that that would be, he had to be prevented from, being a negotiator, but I think he failed in that one. He failed to rally the Democrats, if you like, within the assembly turn to the extreme right to try to find compromises, and of course that's what is downfall. So it was all predictable. Now, what is unfortunate is that it's happening in the middle of the discussions that we are having on the budget.
Who could do a better job at this point? Do you want to see somebody from your party nominated as Prime Minister?
Well, it could be. I think we need somebody who is capable of getting compromises. I mean, this is what we're doing in the Senate all the time. I mean, this is a tradition that we have. And indeed, usually we get majority votes on most texts as we're capable of looking into what everybody wants, obviously kind of different vision of society and what may be a priority. But when you give everybody a little bit of what they want, it works. So I think we need somebody who is capable today of getting these compromises, and certainly somebody who can form a government very, very quickly. There's no shutdown, as it happens in the United States with us, because we have a number of articles in our constitution that allow us to manage in this political crisis, which is one that we're having now. I think the last one was in 1962, so it's not very current in French politics to have this type of situation. But we just now need a government that will be holding together, and maybe that will represent what the National Assembly is about now. Far more, and just move away from the old style where we had majority and the minority. It was a binary system which existed in a lot of countries. In Germany was the same, and ideally what the United States had, with Republicans and Democrats. But now we have a lot of new parties, movements, and so on, and therefore I guess political world needs to basically can work on a new setup, which is kind of changing its culture, and that takes a little bit of time. I think this crisis is pushing them to do it.
But your party is central to it. If we look at the makeup of the National Assembly, we know that the centrist parties won't work with the far right or the far left. So that leaves the Socialist Party in greater numbers since the elections last in the summer. What could convince the Socialist Party to separate themselves from the new Popular Front and the far left parties and to join a sort of unity government of the centre? What would be policies that would be in your support?
Strategy policies are really getting closer. I mean, we have cases that we have grave reservations as to what the farming government was presenting, while we realize that the savings also would be made because of the deficit that farms have. But I think what will, just to answer your question, will be a government where there is a representation of all those who are Democrats, who believe that we can move forward together, and having discussions. I think the leaders are going to meet with the president today, and I think the president is addressed tonight on television at 8 p.m. Has a name that has discussed with all political leaders, and which will be agreeable to all of them. I think we will be in a position to participate in the government and indeed support and certainly move the budget, which is the most important thing for 2025, And then let's
would that be the end of the new Popular Front alliance, though? Would your party separate themselves from their partners in that alliance?
When there are four parties in that alliance, and three of them have indicated that they want to move forward. They do not wish the president to resign, and that they are very willing to move forward. So, 3 out of 4. So maybe it will be a new alliance, if you like, with three parties rather than 4 of them.
Two names from your party who've been floated round of potential candidates. Ségolène Royal, former Environment Minister and presidential candidate, Bernard Cazeneuve, former Prime Minister. Would either of those be people you'd support?
Well, yes, of course, but there are others as well that have not been named by the media that would be potential candidates. But we will see. We will see. I mean, it's not. I think we have learned from voting Elaine that was refused by the president, and we're not going this time forward with names to see what the president has in mind, and then see if we can get an agreement on, if not the prime minister, but the full government that will be, put in place, and we hope as quickly as possible.
Conway Moe, thank you so much for your time on the programme this morning. Socialist Party Senator, former Minister under President François Hollande, we appreciate your insights and contribution to the programme. We're about 45 minutes away, Carla Lizzie, from Michel Barnier handing over the reins of the government. He's due to resign his position to the President, along with the entire government, after the loss of Biden confidence vote yesterday. And we're looking ahead to President Emmanuel Macron's speech to the nation, 8 o'clock this evening local time, 7 p.m. In the UK, to see perhaps will that be the announcement of a new name, or opening of more political paralysis. Perhaps a caretaker government is in place after that. We'll wait and see. Back to you, Elizabeth there.
Stephen, Carol, thank you so much for your time and for that interview live in Paris for us throughout the programme this morning as we think about what next for France. I think the thing that emerges the most is simply the uncertainty now that France is gripped by after the government fell yesterday. Coming up in the next part of Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, though, we're going to be talking about, well, that is one of the political crises, issues affecting Europe. We'll be looking ahead to the European Central Bank's rate decision with our senior reporter Jana Randall, the economic headwinds and also the political ones. How will that factor in? We'll discuss. This is Brief.
Take your Bloomberg Radio listening experience to the next level. Download the Bloomberg Business app today and listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Get live radio, podcasts, and on-demand news updates no matter where you are, from coast to coast and across the globe. Plus, expanded details on your favorite shows at the click of a button. The Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto features. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything.
When I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Oh, my hand? No, you hold my hand. Here we go.
Learn about Adoptable Teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit AdoptUSKids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council. Technology. It's come a long way in the last 100 years. At the American Arbitration Association, we're advancing dispute resolution through the power of artificial intelligence. Introducing Clause Builder AI, trained on almost 100 years of experience, this free breakthrough tool drafts effective arbitration and mediation agreements. And our AAAI lab will keep you up to date with the latest developments on AI and dispute resolution. AAA, the future of dispute resolution is here.
Bloomberg Radio on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Balance of Power podcast, we talk with Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman, about the meeting at Mar-a-Lago that she attended between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, President-elect Donald Trump.
We're pleased that the two leaders who, maybe in ways that people don't appreciate, have sort of a camaraderie. They've known each other for a long time, and they've developed a relationship through, a lot of complicated times, COVID and, the renegotiation of NAFTA and all of it. So,
Well, listen to you. You sound like you're ready to go back already, because a lot of your reporting was about tension over tariffs. He's talking about 25% tariffs on goods from not only Canada, but Mexico. If that actually happens, and maybe you can tell me it won't, based on what they discussed with Canada, reply in time?
Just to clarify, it was a lovely evening. It was fun and cordial, but the tariff discussion and discussion on the border and other priorities, these are serious discussions. And there was a lot of substantive things that were discussed as well. And maybe even more constructively so, in a sense of friendship and partnership. On the tariffs, look, we don't think they're a good idea. They won't be good for Canada, and we don't think they're good for the United States with this massive and growing and strategic trade relationship. So we are really busy trying to make that case. Since President Trump was last in office, Canadian-U.S. trade has gone up year on year since the renegotiation of the NAFTA. We are the biggest customer by far of U.S. exporters, 36 states, and Canada's the number one export market. So it's really important, sort of in terms of actual volumes, but also in terms of what we trade together, some of the strategic goods that we don't want to be getting from our non-allied countries. So we're connected.
Full conversation on the latest edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Listen on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
A very good morning. It's 8:21 a.m. in London. I'm Lizzie Bird, and we check the markets for you all day long here on Bloomberg Radio. Well, European equities are getting off to a pretty solid start, actually. The Stoxx 600 higher 0.25%. Across Europe, you've got the CAC on higher 0.5%, the FTSE 100 flat to the upside. A breakdown by sector, you've got about 3/4 of positive territory. Banks leading the gains higher, nearly 1%, and bottom of the basket, real estate, lower 0.4%. Yields, despite the drama in French politics, weaker 2 basis points, but only at 2.8%. Euro and dollar have been surprisingly strong, perhaps a stronger of 0.3% at a 105 handle, no matter how much of the bad news you already priced in. And as you look ahead to the Wall Street Open, futures flat to the downside, but we did have the S&P 500 hitting another record overnight off the back of Chair Powell's latest comments, interpreted as hawkish, as well as this jump in US tech stocks. Treasury yields higher 2 basis points on the 2-year at 4.14% as we look ahead to the jobs report out of the US tomorrow. Finally, Brent is trading at $72 a barrel, stronger at 20% ahead of the OPEC Plus meeting. That kicks off at 11 a.m. London time. Bitcoin has topped that $100,000 mark for the first time after Donald Trump picked the trade picture ahead of the securities regulator, and it's currently at 102,711. As we go business flash.
It's a Caroline. Next time I look at some of the others that are used in Japan around the world. President Emmanuel Macron this morning looking for a new Prime Minister after a no confidence motion against his government path. But any new leader will face the same financial squeeze that brought down Prime Minister Michel Barnier's administration. And South Korea's ruling party is trying to prevent the president's impeachment by voting against the motion to initiate proceedings. The main opposition party is targeting Saturday for the parliamentary vote on the impeachment motion after President Yoon short-lived attempt to impose martial law. Okay, Prime Minister Keir Starmer will announce new targets for fighting crime in Britain today, including a named police officer for every neighbourhood in England and Wales. The government is aiming to have 13,000 more police officers to reduce crime rates. Those are our global news headlines. Now, in the days ahead, Europe's policymakers will convene to make their last interest rate decision in 2025. Their decision will be set against a backdrop, though, dominated by political uncertainty. The challenges now faced in France, US tariffs looming over the whole of Europe. Could the rate path ahead be more slippery than was first anticipated? Joining me now for more is Bloomberg's senior reporter covering the ECB, Yana Randa. Yana, very good to have you on the programme. France is now facing, well, uncharted territory. What does the country's situation mean for European Central Bank and its policymakers? How might it change or not the trajectory for the ECB?
Yeah, so I think France in itself is another source of uncertainty, of course, and there are already plenty other sources out there, and I'm sure we will get a chance to talk about them. When it comes to the decision itself in the coming days, that of course will not be affected by what we're seeing in France. But of course the economic outlook very much will. But the French economy, which of course is the Eurozone second largest, and the Eurozone economy itself, they're not doing very well at the moment. PMIs are deep in contraction and territory, and uncertainty of this caliber weighs on consumption, it weighs on investment, it stands in the way of reforms. The absence of a government in France, of course, means fiscal policy is very much a wild card, and also an important voice is missing at the European level. So a lot more uncertainty to in the future to be aware of that will change the way the ECB looks at the economy and the economic outlook and the risks associated to that outlook, but not much of an impact on the decision itself, I would say.
Yeah, okay, but the possibility of an economic drag perhaps further down the road. So in terms of this upcoming meeting, do we expect 25 basis points, or could we see a 50 basis point rate reduction?
Yeah, I think 25 is what I would bet my money on. 50, it's been talked about, if you ask me, was never a real option. It was part of the speculation that the ECB might go down this route after PMIs were significantly weaker than expected, after inflation didn't pick up as strongly as people might have expected. But even the market has come around to pricing no, or not significantly more than a quarter point cut for Thursday's meeting. So I would say 25 is the way, the way to position.
Yeah. In terms of the risks, though, in Europe, there are a number, aren't there? Not just the geopolitical uncertainty in Ukraine, there's also Georgia, and looming, possibly, tariffs from an incoming Trump administration. How will these factor into the interest rate decision process? Any risks?
So many risks indeed, and all of that makes it very difficult to know what's ahead. We will get new forecasts, which is going to be very exciting. We'll get a chance to look all the way into 2027. But of course, that's a set of forecasts built on assumptions, and we don't know yet what's going to come on the tariff front. We don't know how the war in Ukraine is going to pan out, which will have an impact on how Europe deals with its own defense. It might impact energy, overall uncertainty, of course. And so the risks and the uncertainty around this forecast are just enormous, which makes it very, very difficult for policymakers to say with certainty what's needed, where to go, and that's a big part behind why policymakers say we are data dependent, we take a very gradual approach here, we're going step by step, and then we look around and see how our actions, our policy affect what's actually happening in the economy.
In terms of the data, as you say, the pressures on the economy, the possibility of stagnation really across Europe is quite significant. The pressures on inflation, though, have also been coming down. Just talk us through the inflation picture in Europe.
Yeah, so we have seen a small pickup in headline inflation that was very much in line with expectations, so that was not a big surprise there. The surprise really was underneath the headline number. So we had core inflation holding steady at 2.7%. It's obviously still above that 2% target. But it was weaker than expected. We are seeing a slowdown in services prices finally, from a very high level, of course, but still closer to 4% than 2% on that indicator. But we're seeing movement as well. And what is going to be very interesting on the inflation side is a look at the quarterly profile of the new projections I mentioned, because
when the ECB last published its forecast in September, it was expecting to reach its target toward the end of next year. And since then, they've already moved forward their expectations, saying sometime in the first half now. And those forecasts out on Thursday will show us when exactly. So it might be as early as the first quarter, which of course then, would have policy implications in the sense that officials feel much more confident that the target is inside, but in fact what the president recently told EU lawmakers, not quite reached, but very much inside. And that will tell us, something about how confident they will be in cutting interest rates further.
Diana, a last thought about 2025 or perhaps even beyond. What do we think is the new neutral rate? Is there a new neutral rate for Europe and for the ECB? It's a big debate in markets that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, for the ECB, it really depends a lot on who you ask. So I think the most embracing estimate is the one that Philip Lane usually gives, and he says it's between the mid ones and the mid twos, so roughly 1.5 to 2.5. There's some, like on the dovish side, you have policymakers who stay more towards the bottom of that range. On the hawkish side, you have policymakers like Isabel Schnabel, who says between 2 and 3%, but between 1.5 and 2.5, and if you're bold enough and say, let's take the middle, then you're looking at 2, and that in fact is also what most economists expect where interest rates will settle.
Okay, Glenn, thank you so much for being with me this morning with that senior reporter covering the European Central Bank. Very good to get your preview, your forecast, what to expect from next week's decision. No wonder. Now, it's 8:32 a.m. here in the city of London. Welcome if you're just tuning in. A very good morning. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And as you mentioned, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Well, we are live in London this morning, but also in Paris, of course, because our own Stephen Cowell has been in Paris covering the fall of the Barnier government. Yesterday, he was watching the vote in Parliament. He's there for us this morning and throughout the programme. So we'll be going back to him shortly for live guest interviews and thinking about the market impact. But firstly, let's just check on the market data right now. Interestingly, the yield spread between French and German yields has not moved significantly despite the travails in France. So currently, we now trade actually at just 80 basis points. So in fact, the spread is narrowed quite considerably by some 3 basis points only this morning. The euro has also been steady overnight and stronger against the weaker dollar. Oil spot 0.539, so over 0.3%. Stocks in Europe are also gaining 0.3, and the CAC 40 seems to bounce higher, 0.6%. So perhaps the bad news was baked into markets. We shall see. Those are the data numbers now.
Now let's get to our top stories. French President Emmanuel Macron is this morning seeking a new Prime Minister after the government of Michel Barnier was toppled by a new confidence vote. Whoever replaces Barnier, though, will face the same difficulty building support in the National Assembly and passing a budget that brings the country's deficit under control. Speaking ahead of the votes, Michel Barnier defended his plan, which contains 60 billion euros in tax hikes and spending cuts. Here are his words to the American data.
I was and am proud to act to build rather than destroy, and that during this period I listened to all those who told me they were willing to work for the good of the country. Honorable members of Parliament, I cannot accept the idea that institutional destabilization could be the objective that would unite a majority of MPs here.
Barnier is ousted after a left-wing coalition teamed up with far-right leader Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party to pass the no confidence motion. She says now the decision on whether to resign from the presidency binds with Emmanuel Macron.
I'm not calling for Emmanuel Macron to resign. I'm saying that there will come a time when if we don't take the path of respect for the voters and respect for the political forces and respect for the elections, so that Michel, the president, will obviously get me in town, but he alone will have the decision, the last word. Don't be shocked.
So that was Marine Le Pen speaking there. Those are some of our top stories this morning, but on the programme we're going to be going back to Stephen, a different Stephen, Stephen of Federated Hermes. That's This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Supply 24-hour source for world markets and breaking business news. Bloomberg 11:30. Coming up, the latest market-moving headlines from Bloomberg. First, an update from our partners at CBS News. CBS News for East gunfire at a religious K-8 school in Northern California.
Both of them boys, one age 6, one age 5.
Butte County Sheriff Corey Homey. Both boys are in critical condition. Police say the gunman took his own life. New York City police are looking for the killer who gunned down United Healthcare CEO on a Manhattan sidewalk. His tourist from one witness uneasy.
I'm quite shocked. I thought perhaps the famous person coming out. Not something like that. That's not what you want to hear.
A new Justice Department report recommends a federal judge monitor the Memphis Police Department, which it says uses excessive force and unconstitutional practices.
Memphis has a decree today, yeah. They say that they want to review the report. We might also want to see what the new president wants to do in this area.
Loyola law professor Lori Levinson. CBS News British. I'm Michael Wallace.
You know Bloomberg 11:30 is on Amazon Alexa. Get live business news and market headlines 24 hours a day, anywhere you have an Alexa device. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 11:30.
This year, JP Morgan Asset Management was named #1 in keeping financial advisors best informed about the economy, about the markets, about new opportunities. And now, with our new guide to ETFs, we're keeping you best informed about how to invest in today's fastest-growing investment vehicles. Download our comprehensive new guide to ETFs at jpmorgan.com/ETF Insights. To use and be best informed financial partners for your clients. Drawbacks to control from brand survey and corporate plus consulting tools to rate classified investment book. Copyright 2024 JP Morgan Chase Company, all rights reserved.
Why just listen to Bloomberg Surveillance when you can also watch us live on YouTube? I'm Lisa Mateo.
And Tom Kane join us weekday mornings along with Wall Street and Michael Barr, starting at 7 a.m.
Head to the Bloomberg Podcast page on YouTube to hear and see the smartest voices on global markets and investment.
Make Bloomberg Surveillance an essential part of your morning routine weekdays from 7 to 10.
Visit the Bloomberg Podcast page on YouTube and click on the live feed to join us today.
Listen carefully. And you hear the rhythm in the markets. Not just in the syncopations triggered by inflation, but in the preludes leading to local elections, the dissonance that moves the decay, and the rising chorus conducted by AI. There's music in the markets, and if you want to learn to listen for it, go through learn more at Bloomberg.com. Bloomberg Radio, on demand, and in your podcast feed. And the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast from BlackRock. Ray Lee.
I think the big picture right now is not one of mean revert, it's one of transformation. We're talking about an environment where actually the key focus ought to be where the longer term trend is heading towards, rather than where the fluctuations are around what used to be a stable longer term trend. And that is also why we see 10-year yields being so much more sensitive to month-to-month data releases, because we're now in this almost unprecedented environment where longer term trend is actually shifting. That means mean revert does not quite apply when we're talking about transformation and moving targets. And that also means if we think something is expensive, they can get more expensive. If we think something is concentrated, they can get more concentrated if there are good reasons for that to continue.
How did you respond to what David Costa did over at Goldman Sachs, modeling out, since we've come so far so fast, our central tendency is a low single-digit outcome. Heated complaints from the academic math community on how we went about that study. Are you that cautious on where the terminal value is of equity prices?
We actually took inspiration from that analysis to try to understand if the measure of concentration, which is to look at the market cap of the biggest company versus the 75th percentile, and look at that ratio, right? By that measure, U.S. equity market is close to the most concentrated in almost 100 years.
Here's a full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hello, good morning. It's 8:40 a.m. in London. I'm Lizzie Bowden, and we check the markets for you all day long here on Bloomberg Radio. We've actually got European equities getting off to quite a strong start despite the fall of the Barnier government. The stock 600 higher 0.3%, the FTSE 100 higher a 10%, but the CAC now on higher 0.5% this morning, and the DAX in Frankfurt higher 0.25%. Breaking down by sector, more than 3/4 are in positive territory. Travel and leisure leading the gains. Real estate still bottom of the basket. And as we look to the bond space, we have oat yields on the 10-year weaker a basis point at 2.8%. Euro dollar stronger at 0.25%, actually at a 105 handle. So perhaps a lot of this bad news was already priced in, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Looking ahead to the Wall Street Open, we have futures pointing slightly lower. How the S&P hit another record overnight off the back of Chair Powell's latest comments, interpreted hawkishly, and that jump in US tech stocks. Treasury yields currently higher 2 basis points at 4.1% on the 2-year as we look ahead, of course, to the big job report tomorrow. Brent is trading at $72 a barrel, stronger 0.3% ahead of the OPEC Plus meeting today. That kicks off at 11 a.m. London time. And we have Bitcoin at 102,833, having topped the $100,000 mark on the appointment of a pro-crypto head by Donald Trump of the securities regulator. That should be my business flash.
Lizzie, thank you so much. I'm Caroline. Okay, let's have a look at some of the other stories making news in the UK and around the world. French President Emmanuel Macron is this morning looking for a new Prime Minister after a no confidence motion against his government passed. But any new leader will face the same financial squeeze that brought down Prime Minister Michel Barnier's administration. South Korea's ruling party is trying to prevent the president's impeachment by voting against the motion to initiate proceedings. The main opposition party is targeting Saturday for the parliamentary vote on the impeachment motion after President Yoon's short-lived attempt to impose martial law. And the Prime Minister here in the UK, Keir Starmer, will announce new targets for fighting crime in Britain today, including a named police officer for every neighbourhood in England and Wales. The government is aiming to have 13,000 more police officers in order to reduce crime rates. Those are some of our global news headlines.
Let's get back to our markets conversation now. We have in the studio with us Stephen Orth, CIO of Equities at Federated Home. It's good to have you back. Let's start with graphs. Is it investable?
Oh, no, I think it's investable, but we're underweight there. I kind of look at this as, Liz Truss's biggest thing she did for the equity markets. The kind of Liz Truss put in, have a policy. And I think the equity markets are sort of looking at this and saying, well, it doesn't look good, but it can't get too bad because the bond market's going to slap them around if it does. I mean, bond yields in France are now trading above, slightly above Spanish bond yields, which you thought that wouldn't have happened. I think the markets are sort of assuming somehow or other they're going to at least roll forward last year's budget, and they'll just keep muddling along.
Yeah, so the bond market vigilantes that are going to keep the politicians in check. I think there is a question, though, about whether it would keep Jordan Bardella, for example, in check, and we don't know how things are going to play out. Is there any part of the market that you would invest in Europe at the moment as we think about kind of outflows from Europe?
We have a capital out there, we're just not overweighted there, but sure, I mean, the energy companies look pretty solid to us. Banks, probably better off with U.S. banks at this point. There's some issues maybe there. There's a couple of tech companies that probably are overpriced just because of their scarcity factor. Some good retailers, there's things to buy there.
You mentioned the Spanish bond story, but is Spain the right spot at the periphery, perhaps?
I agree with you on that. It is. That's probably where some of the growthier areas of the markets are. A lot of Spanish companies have had to outgrow their markets, so they're kind of dependent on most of Europe and even the U.S. Still, there's more, they're centered there. There's more growth in Spain probably likely in the next 10 years, 5 years than there is elsewhere.
Are we trying to sort of comfort ourselves in Europe by the idea that adversity will mean unity? And Christina Lagarde again with the piece out in The Economist today. She spoke a couple of weeks ago ago about the idea that sort of in the face of Trump tariffs, that Europe will change, will improve the outlook for investors. I mean, do you believe that? Wishful thinking?
Yeah, I hope so. Hey, the thing is, like, he's gonna, one of the reasons he's done cut money out of Europe back in early July was we're looking at the Trump agenda and seeing this is a little bit difficult here. Because if the Europeans are spending a lot less on defense than Trump thinks they should be spending, and there's a big war on the European border right now, somebody's got to pay for that to keep the Russians from rolling into Poland.
Or do you think that
That's going to come out of, it's going to have to come out of Germany and France, or they're going to have to pay for it. So where does that come from? They're already running budget deficits reasonably high, so they just, their degrees of freedom are limited. And
is that an opportunity?
It's difficult, and then you've got a political environment that's difficult to manage because there's so many different European countries with sovereign governments.
Well, one of the kind of unusual out of consensus calls is that the rebuilding of Ukraine might also help to generate defense industry and other, cement manufacturers, for example, that could provide opportunity.
That could be a big stimulus. Absolutely. That would be a huge stimulus. And in fact, one of the things I talked about in my piece, sort of unexpected positives, could be a big stimulus. I mean, what if Trump's threats and, bonds and everything else get to a peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian situation? It does feel like we might be drifting there. You're already seeing it happen in the Middle East. And maybe you get a peace coming out of that, and then it's like a new Marshall Plan in the Ukraine. And the European companies would benefit from that. But, there aren't as many big defense manufacturers in Europe as there are in the U.S. And U.S. companies are also going to benefit even there, which is a little frustrating, I guess, for Europe. But
Indeed, the likes of BAE Systems so heavily exposed to the US, and if you see Musk's efficiency cut, they could take a beating as well. Just pivoting to the US stock market, we are in that time of year where we start talking about Santa rallies. Where do you expect the S&P 500 to end the year, and do you think that it'll continue the momentum into Q1?
I learned a long time ago not to set a forecast for the market 2 weeks out. So we take a look at a year out. So this time last year, we had a target for the S&P of 6,000 for next year. And we're here at 6,000 right now. So what I told my guys is, here's the thing, we think we're so smart, but actually there's a lot of smart people in the market, and we see the same things we're seeing. And they usually catch up to us fairly quickly. So I've got a target out for 2025 and 2026 right now. That's what we're working on. We have a 2026 target on the S&P of 7,500. For all I know, we'll get there next year. I don't know. Maybe, Lizzie, we'll get there in 2 weeks. I hope not. I think a gradual move there on the back of strong earnings is the way to get there. So I can run you through how I get to 7,500.
Well, the main point that I wanted to get to is why you also believe it's forecast in the US, which isn't it?
Right, because to get there, the market has been very narrow in the U.S. And people look at the multiple of the market, and I'm sure I guess on you say, the market's kind of intense, the market's kind of... It's really not if you divide it up the way you should. So a third of the S&P is in these Mag 7 stocks that are asset-light, low businesses, growing cash, not like fictitious earnings, at 15 to 25% a year. They're worth a higher multiple. And so if you take that third of the market and say it's worth 25 times, then you look at the rest of the market, and it's actually not crazy expensive for the fundamentals. But we think if the market's going to go to, we think, 7,000 by next year and 7,500 the year after, you're going to have the rest of it where there's some real value. And a lot of stocks we own in the small cap space, large cap bank space, these stocks are trading low, mid-teens. They're not expensive.
Well, I suppose to get them while they're cheap. Stephen Orr, CIA for Equities at Federated Hermes. We could talk to you all morning, but thanks so much for joining us again in the Movie Radio studio. Stephen, great to have you. This is Bloomberg.
investment, and economics with the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube.
We are seeing stocks rise around the world.
We have a massive rally in the bond market.
Record revenue out of Apple. We've got inflation moderating.
I'm Tom Key, inviting you to watch and listen to the best analysis on business and investment. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to hear from the smartest names on Wall Street. Just head to YouTube and search Bloomberg Podcast today.
Independent financial advisors focus on building a relationship with you that goes beyond your portfolio. As fiduciaries, they must act in your best interest, always. The relationship they have with you will be based on transparency and trust, and they are committed to bringing you advice that fits your values. That's why Charles Schwab is proud to support them. Visit findyourindependentadvisor.com.
Bloomberg readers are incredibly busy people during the week. That's why we're introducing our new weekend edition, to help our readers find more time to think and to let their thoughts travel further. We want to zoom out and look at not just the economy, but life and culture through a Bloomberg lens, to help our readers step back and see further ahead. I'm Catherine Bell, Executive Editor of Bloomberg's Weekend Edition. We look forward to spending time with you on the weekend at bloomberg.com/weekend.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Francine Lagua.
We're joined by Claudia Panseri, Chief Investment Officer for France at PPS Wealth Management. Claudia, what's a good entry point for French assets?
I think you need to be very selective. French bonds on the short tenor, so the very short yield are already appealing. Spread has been widening on all the yield curve. I will not touch the long term because the risk is to see the spread to the bond widening again. There is a tipping point where you can start buying, but still too early. On French assets and equities in particular, increase the market didn't make a big discrepancy between what is really impacted by slowing growth and cutting costs. Everything which is also exposed to the US has been underperforming, so I think there is already some opportunity to stop it and make the selection, to make the distinction between what is exporting to the US, what is doing, what is cheap, and what is impacted by slowing growth and uncertainty. The market didn't make such a distinction yet. Bonds have been under pressure, insurance have been under pressure, luxury goods, every single stock in the cap as a premium relative to European papers. So selectively, but there are some opportunities already.
Hear more conversations like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Very good morning, it's 8:53 a.m. I'm Lucy Brennan and we check the markets for you all day long here on Bloomberg Radio. So you're looking at European equities stronger, 0.3% on the stock 600, the FTSE 100 flat to the upside, the CAC bonds racing ahead, 0.7% this morning in Paris, and the DAX in Frankfurt higher 0.2%. Breakdown by sector, we've got only 3 in negative territory. Travel and leisure still at the top of the basket, but we still have real estate at the bottom, down 0.6%. Oat yields are weaker, a basis point on the 10-year at 2.88% after the fall of the Barnier government. Euro dollar currently stronger, 0.2% at a 105 handle, having perhaps already priced in the bad news. But as we look ahead to the Wall Street Open, futures flat to the downside on Wall Street. We had the S&P 500 hitting another record overnight off the back of Fed Chair Powell's latest comments and that done US tech stocks. Treasury yields higher 3 basis points on the 10-year at 4.2% as we look ahead to the jobs report tomorrow. Brent trading at $72 a barrel from the 0.2% as we look ahead to the OPEC Plus meeting today. Delays as it is to 11 a.m. London time. And we have Bitcoin having beaten record, passing that 100k mark, now at $102,806, up 5% this on the pick by Donald Trump of a pro-crypto head, the securities regulator. Thank you very much.
Lizzie, thank you so much. Time now to check in then on the stocks that are making moves since the open. Our markets footage is in his head with more. Now, Games Workshop behind games like Warhammer It's ascended to 3100. Why?
Yes, just an incredible story for Games Workshop. So we got confirmation last night that they will move up to the 100 index, as you said. It's the maker of Warhammer, the tabletop game. So a really niche business, but its valuation is absolutely solid. This company is now worth £4.7 billion. This is after last month they gave a trading update, signaling another increase in sales. And it is all of these tabletop medieval games that are the main driver of their revenue. They do also have a online gaming business and licensing with PlayStation and Xbox, but it is actually mainly tabletop games. So quite just a fascinating story in terms of it being traditional tabletop gaming that are now in the FTSE 100.
Meanwhile, we've got the bank second position in the stocks at 100% way down at 1.4%. Is that in fact the story of European M&A?
Yeah, so we've got a Bloomberg exclusive last night saying that Amundi over in France is looking at the asset management part of the Allianz Global Investors. Now for Allianz, it is only around 5% of the business because the company is mostly an insurer. But Amundi getting a boost today up around 2%. Now the company has sold up recently, partly due to the French political situation, of course, but also some worries about their relationships over Italy, given the lines we've seen on M&A around credit and other countries. But for the moment, that stock is gaining an M&A story in asset management.
Okay, so that related to France, interesting. Retail shares, Fraser's Group, we were talking about this morning, not having done so well, versus Watches of Switzerland.
Yeah, so Fraser's Group hit hard today. It's still down 12% at the moment. It had its biggest drop since the 2020 pandemic days. The company warning of weakness in its sales both before the budget and after the budget. So pretty much just a very grim outlook in terms of UK retail. So that one hit pretty hard. But Watches of Switzerland, meanwhile, is saying that given the increases in the price of Rolex watches have been more modest than expected recently. They've actually seen an increase in their sales. That one's going the other way. It's up 8% today. So the retailers, Fraser Group, of course, owns Sports Direct and also House of Fraser. It does still have several of those still in operation. That one hit hard and Watches of Switzerland moving higher.
Alright, Joe Easton, thanks for taking us through those stocks to watch. We are 57 minutes into the cash trade here in Europe. The Bora Stock 600 higher at 0.3%. But Caroline, it's about time I go and get you a cup of tea. I'm going to hand over to Tom Mackenzie on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with you, but so much to dive into when it comes to the French political story. I'm so glad that we've got our very own Stephen Carroll on the ground in Paris for us, and we've got an exciting hour coming up.
Yes, absolutely. So Stephen's going to be joined by Phil Serafino to discuss the impact then of the government falling in France. Just in the next few minutes, they're expecting to hear about the formal resignation of Michel Barnier. What comes next, though? And most of our guests are completely stumped as to who is going to be picked, whether we will even hear a name for a new prime minister, whether it's going to be a caretaker government, how Macron is going to handle this. He will be speaking to the French nation about it later today. It's also quite weird that you're going to see the reopening of Notre Dame, this great success in a way after the 5 years ago. This landmark in France is going to be reopened with loads of heads of state and government in Paris over the weekend, and yet Macron is perhaps at the weakest since he was elected, as a 39-year-old in that landslide victory in 2017. Now France faces this deep political uncertainty.
And yet whoever replaces Michel Barnier likely to face all the same headaches of the rebuilding, perhaps not likely to be as successful as Notre Dame. That's at least what the markets seem to know, that whoever comes in next will be in the same position. We've got the CAC on higher, 0.6% now that we know what is happening, at least in terms of the government falling. That's all next. This is Bloomberg.
Tomorrow, we focus on November jobs.
Still a solid economy. Unemployment rate 4.1%.
What will the numbers mean for the Fed's December meeting?
Average hourly earnings growth pretty darn solid.
How does it change the investor analysis? The November jobs report on Bloomberg tonight. Tomorrow morning at 8:30. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. And always on Bloomberg Country Podcast. Changes everything. Live from the financial capital of the world, broadcasting across the globe. This is WBR New York. Bloomberg
President Emmanuel Macron faces a deepening crisis after his government was toppled last night. As far-right leader Marine Le Pen sees her political star rise, the second-largest economy could face months of financial paralysis, as bond markets are taking note.
And in other news, United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has been shot dead in New York, with the perpetrator still at large.
Plus, topping $100,000. Bitcoin passes a major milestone on news that Trump is picking a crypto proponent as his top financial regulator. That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 92.9 Boston, Sirius XM Channel 121, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning from London, I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
And live in Paris, I'm Stephen Carroll. You're listening to Daybreak Europe. We're following the latest from the whirlwind 24 hours in French politics. Who will Emmanuel Macron name as his prime minister? And will it be enough to save his presidency?
Well, we'll have more from Stephen in just a moment, but let's get to the market reaction. Quite interestingly, the spread between French and German bond yields has actually narrowed down to 80 basis points, so narrowed by 3 basis points this morning. We know that the government has ruled, we don't know what comes next. The euro, though, is also reasonably steady. It's actually up 0.2% against the US dollar this morning, so no panic in markets, which made it 1.0529 for the euro dollar. Also, European stocks are up 0.3 for the US stock 600. The cat cow aren't even managing a gain of 0.6%, so an outsized gain versus the rest of the European markets. We also await, of course, the non-farm payrolls out of the US tomorrow. We've got 10-year US Treasury yields this morning trading at 4.2%. Bitcoin surged to 100,000 yesterday. We now trade just shy of $103,000. And as the US oil output continues to hit record highs, Brent crude futures at $70.45 the barrel with an OPEC plus meeting today.
So the top story today, the French President Emmanuel Macron is this morning seeking a new prime minister after the government of Michel Barnier was toppled by a no-confidence vote. But whoever replaces Barnier will face the same difficulty in building support in the National Assembly and passing a budget that brings the country's budget deficit under control. Speaking ahead of the vote, Michel Barnier defended his plan, which contained 60 billion euros in tax hikes and spending cuts. His words spoken by the translator.
60 billion in interest, which the French people will have to pay every year, which is higher than our defense budget or our education budget, and it will certainly get even bigger if we do nothing.
Barnier was ousted after a left-wing coalition teamed up with far-right leader Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party to pass the no-confidence motion. She says the budget is not what the public voted for.
Stop public expenditures that the public is not in favor of. We are going to take this all the way because the only response we have is just taxes, taxes, taxes.
Marine Le Pen speaking through a translator. The result of the vote, while expected, pitches the country into a period of turbulence, is likely to further unsettle investors.
Now, traders are weighing the path ahead for the euro. Montgomery Koning and Barclays saying defence can only be considered a headwind to the currency. French borrowing costs relative to Germany's have soared in recent weeks. The spread hitting the bondest since the euro area debt crisis, but coming in today narrowing to around 80 basis points. And European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde is now calling on the European Union to ramp up its efforts to unify its fragmented financial infrastructure. Writing in The Economist ahead of the French vote, Lagarde said that Europe must refocus, exposing the key blockages in the financing pipeline and identifying a smaller number of solutions with the highest return.
Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, was shot dead in Manhattan on Wednesday morning. The 50-year-old was one of the United's Health's most senior executives and was outside the New York Hilton Midtown, where the company was hosting its investor day. The suspect fired multiple shots before fleeing, prompting an ongoing manhunt. The New York Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch.
I want to be clear. At this time, Every indication is that this was a premeditated, pre-planned, targeted attack.
Jessica Tish speaking there as police offered a $10,000 reward for tips. According to the New York Police Department, Brian Thompson arrived in New York on Monday. He did not travel with a security detail. In a phone call with NBC News, his wife said he'd been receiving threats.
Now, two markets where Bitcoin has surged to a record of more than $100,000. This after Donald Trump picked crypto proponent Paul Atkins as the next head of the US securities regulator. The digital asset rose as much as 6.1% after the announcement that Atkins would replace Gary Gensler, who had cracked down on digital assets. Nathan Dean, senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, said the pick will bring significant change.
This is the first time that they've really had somebody in the regulatory repertoire, if you will, that's going to be thinking of the crypto world. And so, Commissioner Atkins, because he used to be a commissioner at the SEC, he's actually come out and he's done a lot of work in the crypto space. So where we're going with this is that, the SEC chair has a really important role because they can put out a ruling, give you a little bit more color. Okay, here are what are the rules for crypto. Meaning, if you have a security and you are an exchange like Coinbase, here's how you operate.
Nathan Dean from Bloomberg Intelligence speaking there. The crypto market jumped about $1.3 trillion since Trump's election win. Bitcoin ETFs have attracted a net inflow of about $32 billion.
Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says he expects to have good relations with the incoming Trump administration. Speaking at the New York Times Deal Book Summit, the central banker downplayed the prospects of tension with the president-elect.
There's a set of institutional relationships between the Fed and every administration. I fully expect that we'll have the same general kinds of relationships that we have, institutional relationships, for example, with the Council of Economic Advisors, but most importantly with the Treasury Department.
Jerome Powell speaking in New York. Turning to economic matters, he added that he expects Fed officials to move cautiously as they continue to cut rates. But he says the economy is in remarkably good shape. His comments come as US stocks hit all-time highs owing to a rally in big tech, which drove the S&P 500 to 56th closing record in 2024.
Here in the UK, the CEO of Lloyds Bank has warned that the uncertainty around motor finance and selling is affecting investor confidence in British banking. Charlie Nunn says investors have raised worries about the UK's lengthy review of car finance after a court ruling that could significantly broaden its scope. As part of the probe, the Financial Conduct Authority is considering giving lenders more time to respond to customer complaints about fixed commissions on auto loans. Lloyds, the biggest provider of car finance, has already set aside £450 million to pay for possible compensation and other costs linked to the investigation. Moody's estimates that it could cost the industry as a whole £30 billion.
Okay, those are your top stories on the markets. European stocks are currently up 0.3%, so set at least at this early stage for a sixth straight day of gains. On Wall Street, the S&P needs after that 56th record for the year, currently pointing lower by a 8%. The 10-year Treasury is yielding right now 4.20. Yields are up 2 basis points on the US benchmark sovereign debt. That's a check of the markets.
So, we are going to get to our main story this morning. We're live from London and Paris today. The government of Michel Barnier has been ousted by a no-confidence vote. We've got a great lineup of guests for you to discuss and analyse. As you say, the markets don't seem to be taking it too badly, actually. Stephen Cowell is in Paris for us. It's been a very dramatic 24 hours in politics. What happens next, Stephen, is looking really quite uncertain. What are we thinking about?
Well, the one thing we do know is that in the next few minutes, Michel Barnier will officially have resigned as Prime Minister. He's at the Elysee Palace as we speak to resign following the no-confidence vote yesterday, as he's obliged to do. He's never choice in the matter, but the machinations or the procedure is playing out now as we're speaking. And Emmanuel Macron has a whole series of meetings lined up today ahead of his address to the nation at 8 o'clock this evening. So the President of the National Assembly, Bob Coupé, is going to be meeting the President in about 2 hours' time from now. So that's one of the key, I suppose, reasons to watch, because she has already called on Emmanuel Macron to name a prime minister quickly and not to leave the situation floating in her words for longer. Remember the last time around, remained a caretaker prime minister for 51 days after the election, while Emmanuel Macron ruminated on his choice of prime minister. He of course settled on Michel Barnier, drawing on his great experience as a negotiator, and he failed to do what he was set out to do, which was to get agreement in the National Assembly on a budget, which led us to this confidence moment and a very uncertain next few steps. Let's bring in our senior editor in Paris, Serafino, for more. So we're going to be hearing from Emmanuel Macron later on, as I said. Do you think that he might actually announce a new prime minister at that stage?
It's entirely possible, but he is very unpredictable. He keeps his own counsel, and he's also the last time around you mentioned it took a long time for him to choose a prime minister, and in that process, several names came out publicly as likely candidates, and he was on the verge of naming them, and in the end, he went somewhere else and actually chose Michel Barnier. So impossible to know. There is a real sentiment, let's say, in French political circles that he does need to act quickly. As you said, Brown, he made that point. A couple other government ministers have now speaking, saying something needs to happen quickly.
Very much focus on the Socialist Party in the range of choices, though, because taking someone from the left might, in theory, at least win over some of those centre-left politicians and perhaps build a bigger minority for whoever is going to be in charge in the very fractured National Assembly. We were speaking to Central Senator Ellen Conley-Moore a little bit earlier on the programme. She didn't seem too bothered by the prospect of breaking up the new Popular Front as the alliance with the hard-left parties is known. She said it would be policy that would drive that and didn't seem opposed to the idea that there's Ségolène Royal, former Prime Minister, presidential candidate, or Bernard Cazeneuve, former Prime Minister, as being nominated. Are there names out there that we should be watching?
I think those are two to start with. The problem is that alliance has proven to be much more durable than people thought when it was first formed. Sébastien Lecornu, who's the defense minister, he was on the radio this morning saying, we really do need to break the socialists away from the far left party that's in that alliance. And they've been trying to do that for months and have not succeeded. Cazeneuve's name came up the last time around. He is a distinct possibility. The question is, will that succeed? Will that be enough to get the socialists to join sort of this centrist coalition and move the budget forward? Up to now, that hasn't happened, but that does seem to be the goal.
Because you said there's no budget currently passed for next year, and we are looking at counting down to the end of the current spending plans. What's the next big risk event for markets? Because reaction has been pretty muted so far.
Right. The market is actually up today. I think it's the sixth day in a row. The stock market's up. Bond spreads are narrowing. So for now, investors are giving Macron time. I think the next event would be if there's no sign within a couple of days of any progress, then maybe investors will take a second look. Don't forget, there's already been a lot of bad news priced in. The CAC 40 is doing very badly this year. It's one of the worst performing major markets in Europe, and bond spreads have already widened considerably. So for now, there's a little bit of time, but I think investors want to see some progress within a matter of days, not weeks.
Briefly, back to the politics, Bill. How does Marine Le Pen play this now? She's in a position of strength after getting this confidence vote passed.
Yeah, the interesting thing is the way the process works, all the decision-making right now is in Macron's hands. He gets to choose the prime minister, and there's nothing she can do about it. And if he can come up with a way to sort of thread that needle we were talking about and build a majority in Parliament, that would leave her on the outside. But if he's unable to do that, she retains a lot of power because she's got a big block in Parliament, and she clearly is on the front foot in terms of public sentiment right now. So, but it's Macron's decision to make, and we'll see what he does as far as choosing the prime minister.
Okay, so Serafino, I see you out in Paris. Thank you very much. Let's watch for the next few hours. Caroline, I feel like there's more French drama ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting moment, and it is fascinating that all the cards are now back in Emmanuel Macron's hands, and he said that he won't resign. So we shall wait and see what happens then. Stephen, Carol, thank you so much for being with us live in Paris this morning. More from Stephen a bit later on in the programme. But I also want to bring in Bluebank's executive market editor Paul Dobson for a conversation now. There's political turmoil in France. There's also big moves in Bitcoin to get to this morning, Paul. The impact, firstly, of the political shock in France, it doesn't seem to have moved either the euro or stocks particularly. In fact, stocks are higher, and the bond spread between French and German yields has narrowed. How do you explain that?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Well, I think as Bill was saying just now, the key is for some swift action. If you let this linger, then the market might start to lose confidence some more. But at the moment, it's holding out some hope that we've already priced in the worst kind of case scenario for France. And if you look at the broader global backdrop, markets are really, in remarkably good shape, as Jerome Powell might say. He said that about the US economy could easily be describing what's going on across the world at the moment. If you look at the MSCI All Country World Index, it's rising for a sixth day, so at an all-time high. It's up for the last 3 weeks as well, showing all signs of strength. Measures of implied volatility right across markets are down where they were before we had that big spike up in August. You look at credit spreads, they're all contained as well. The backdrop is just very favourable for markets everywhere right now, and that's one of the things that's also increasing that confidence into Bitcoin, in some of the excesses that we're seeing there. But it's kind of, steady bond yields, good environment for equities. We've got the US going from strength to strength and really leading the way as well. And so I feel like it's more that global context with really, putting a little bit of fortitude into France's markets and their confidence in the South at the moment.
Well, France decided that some of their equities are shrugging on this news. Not many stocks going to Bitcoin, and this is a real market. Of course, through that 100,000, I think you just touched on this, but what's the risk? Is this being derailed, or is there further momentum here? What do we make of this?
It's never easy to say it with confidence, of course, but I think the market is really into this idea of more deregulation and more broadening out across international finance for Bitcoin and for crypto more generally, with Gary Gensler getting replaced by somebody at the SEC with a lot more kind of credentials in terms of crypto, a lot more confidence in it. That means that the market can continue to invest in financial products built around the tokens, and that can lend it more strength as well. And so you see that momentum gathering pace and the idea and the optimism continuing to pan out.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, thank you so much for putting markets into context for us. Bluebank's executive market editor, Paul Dobson there. This, of course, as we look to Paul Atkins, Trump's selection for the SEC. Much more next from Europe. We'll have a key interview with Teresa Rivera next. This is Bloomberg.
Breaking news first. The French government falls after no confidence vote in Parliament.
Emmanuel Macron has brushed off any suggestion that he will resign. It's not like in the US, there's no shutdown. If it does become a political crisis, or if it spills over to the rest of Europe, that would become much more intense.
Continuing coverage and complete analysis on Bloomberg 1130. Context changes everything.
Your business deploys AI pilots everywhere. But are they going anywhere? Or are they stuck in silos, exhausting resources, unable to scale? Maybe you don't need hundreds of AI pilots. You need a holistic strategy. IBM has 65,000 consultants with Gen AI expertise who can help you design, integrate, and optimize AI solutions. So you're not just deploying AI, you're scaling it across your business. Learn more at IBM.com/consulting. IBM. Let's create.
Imagine the power of AI drafting arbitration and mediation clauses tailored to your needs. Imagine disputes being resolved faster and more efficiently than we have. That's why the American Arbitration Association created Clause Builder AI, a free breakthrough tool that uses generative AI to draft effective clauses. And why we created the AAA Lab, your go-to destination for the latest developments on AI and dispute resolution. AAA. The future of dispute resolution is here.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand, and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, a conversation with
Hard, president of Leasing for North America, on the state of commercial real estate. We really see 2025 as the year that real estate gets redefined. We're 5 years post the pandemic. We've put that all behind us now. People have experimented with different ways to view commercial real estate, and now it's really about setting a value and creating a value going forward. So across the key urban markets, particularly New York and San Francisco, we're seeing demand that we haven't seen in 5 years, which is a really good thing to see, because that demand will start to create future value in those assets.
What kind of demand? What are you hearing?
In terms of demand, I think the most active segments of the market are still financial services across the country. Also, technology has a very strong and growing portion of demand. So we're seeing both of that.
So relative to Newmark, let's back up for a moment. Publicly traded company, one of the top real estate advisory firms in the country. Lots of different businesses. What's the main business, and in terms of this thesis about 2025 being the reset, what are the data points that you're seeing?
Well, we've certainly created a purposeful kit of different parts that will come together to drive our business forward. So we're number one in capital markets across the country. As you're looking at what's going to happen in the debt markets and what's happening with the debt that will be maturing in the next year, there will be an onslaught of capital markets activity that will happen across the country, and that will really reset the value. And that mixed with tenant demand is what's going to drive the business forward. So we think the services business is going to have really spectacular years in 25 and 26.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of a Bloomberg Intelligence podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash. Good morning, happy Thursday, 9:21 in the city of London. European stocks up 0.3%. We are set for 6 straight days of gains from European equities, despite the political standoff in France. Over in France, and on the CAC 40 is actually up 0.5%. It's another decent day for French stocks, looking past the political budget standoff and implications, of course, for President Macron. He's going to be speaking later this evening in France. We'll see what he has to say. French market's up 36 points. US futures currently pointing to modest losses of 10% with the context that they hit a 56th record high yesterday. And Nasdaq 100 just more than 1%, led by the likes of Nvidia and other big tech names. Currently, the Nasdaq 100 futures are pointing to modest losses of 0.1%. In your currency markets, euro dollar is trading at 105, up a 10%. The pound is also gaining a 10% trade now at 127 versus the US dollar. In the debt markets, the US benchmark 10-year is yielding 4.20, yields are up 2 basis points. The Fed Chair Jay Powell saying that officials can move cautiously because of the strength of that US economy. In the oil markets, Brent trading $72.49, up 2.10%. OPEC Plus will be later today and could make a decision on whether they put more oil back onto the markets. And Bitcoin, this is the big asset at the moment, breaking through $100,000 per coin for the first time on record, currently trading at $103,000 per Bitcoin, up 5% in session. Let's check the markets 9:23.
John, thank you. I'm going to take time now to look at some of the other stories making news in the UK and around the world. French President Emmanuel Macron is looking for another Prime Minister after a no-confidence motion against his government passed. But any new leader will face the same financial squeeze that brought down National administration. The South Korean ruling party is trying to prevent the president's impeachment by voting against the motion to initiate the proceedings. The main opposition party is aiming for Saturday for the parliamentary vote on the impeachment motion after President Yoon's short-lived attempts to impose martial law. And here in the UK, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced new targets for fighting crime in Britain, including a named police officer for every neighbourhood in England and Wales. The government's aiming to add 13,000 more police officers in order to reduce crime rates. There's a some of our global news headlines.
Okay, so one of our top news this morning. French President Emmanuel Macron is this morning seeking a new Prime Minister after the government of Michel Barnier was toppled by a no-confidence vote
It's a decision that will have far-reaching consequences for the Eurozone. Earlier, Teresa Rivera, the EU's new powerful antitrust chief, and number two in the European Commission, after Ursula von der Leyen spoke to Bloomberg's Laura in Brussels for her first interview since taking up her role at the start of the week, as well as recent political events. They discussed her approach to big tech regulation by forcing Google to divest its ad tech businesses on the table, hopes for good cooperation with the Trump administration, and how to keep the EU on track with decarbonisation.
The deep economic transformation that we are experiencing needs to pay attention to the drivers for creating opportunities, so to be clean, but also to the drivers that ensure that people can benefit from these opportunities. So being just, we're trying to be competitive. Competitiveness is very much linked to the digital and green transformations that are already ongoing worldwide.
And one of these sort of tools and legacies that was left behind by your predecessor, Margaret Vestager, is a legacy being very tough on big tech, legacy in Silicon Valley, but also she left you new tools in the Digital Markets Act. Where will you focus your energy in enforcing the Digital Markets Act? You have a lot of cases pending at the moment.
It's true that what we have also experienced these years is that there are global players that do not fit in the traditional way we understand regulation or a well-functioning market, and they concentrate increasingly more and more power market that at the end affects the prices and the competitiveness and the competition between the different players in the business and the household. So what we will try to do is, of course, to keep on going here legacy, ongoing on her legacy, to implement proper implementation of the Digital Markets Act and to follow, to try to identify how we can ensure that digital is real, that the protection of consumers is also real.
Yeah, but also over all these years, for example, $8 billion have been fined to Google, and Margaret Vestager before leaving said that basically the only way that they seem to actually be able to deal with this competitiveness issue, because these companies can sort of absorb these costs, is basically a divestment, particularly on ad tech from Google. Is that a view that you share?
It's something that it is, of course, on the table, and we try to work together with other relevant competition authorities worldwide, including the US competition authorities. And in some cases, it is true that the question is how much power they accumulate, because they go along the value chain in different aspects with the digital markets. And in those cases, it is important to take into consideration this potential division, this potential divestment from some of these business cases. So we will be assessing case by case.
And speaking to the DOJ then, because they, of course, are also doing similar issues you just mentioned, it's coordinating.
Well, I have been in contact with some other authorities, and it's been only 72 hours in office, but we will do that.
But another question, have you been in contact with Trump or his team, or any contact with the U.S. Because of course, he has been very outspoken against Margaret Vestager and the influence over American companies.
Well, what I got was this news coming from yesterday evening here in Brussels that he will be appointing someone born in Europe to deal with this competition and antitrust cases. So I hope to have the opportunity to meet her soon and to exchange views on how they intend to proceed.
Yeah, and I'm trying to imagine how you see managing that relationship, because Donald Trump doesn't necessarily draw a distinction about discrete sort of antitrust matters. He will see it as a European attack on the United States and may put that in a sort of broader negotiation and could tie it to all sorts of things. So how do you anticipate that playing out, particularly when you're going after some of America's most powerful companies?
Well, I don't anticipate anything, but I will try to anticipate cooperative relations in this case. I think that both American consumers and European consumers, worldwide consumers, benefit when we pay attention on how the markets does work. And I would state, and this is quite clear, that before in the previous Trump mandate, there was also some relevant involvement and coordination between the competition policies and decisions between the two authorities. So I hope that we can work together.
And you will have heard the sort of old adage that the U.S. innovates and the EU regulates. And that is obviously something that you've also come to try to address. It is not just antitrust and competitiveness, it's the competitiveness of the bloc as a whole. How do you change sort of that reputation within the EU in trying to marry these two roles of antitrust, but also making the Eurozone more competitive?
That's one of the most important targets for this period, for this term of the European Commission, to ensure that we will recover the attractiveness of investing in Europe, the European dream, in case of the economic and business reality. And I think that this may differ from the way that the US plays their own capacities to become attractive. The understanding of the social model may differ to a certain extent from Europe and the US. But yes, we need to bet on simplification and a much more well-functioning single market, because we are probably one of the biggest markets worldwide, and to count on the innovation capacities of our business and our society.
And one of the sort of great sort of solutions that has been advocated by Mario Draghi and a number of others is that basically you need to build European champions, not just national champions. Does that mean as a sort of antitrust authority you'll be a little bit more lenient in looking at potentially takeovers of companies within Europe in order to build what we're being told is required to compete with China and the United States?
I guess that there are two things that we need to pay attention to: how we can build a stronger players within the single market without putting at risk a well-functioning single market where the small companies, which is a big share of our business corporates.
Okay, that was Teresa Rivera, the EU's new anti-trust chief, speaking to Bloomberg's Oliver Crook in Brussels for her first interview since taking up the role at the start of the week. We'll have a check on the markets next.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. France is committed to keep its European leadership with Germany, with Italy, with Spain, with all European countries.
Ultimately, over the next month or two, we're heading toward a slow motion, less dramatic Liz Truss moment for France.
Fighting for freedom connects us as Europeans, our past and our present foundation, and our generations. And for me, this is the raison d'être of our union.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
It's 9:31 a.m. here in London. Good morning, I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Tom McKenzie. Check markets a little bit longer than that.
So we are thinking about what's happening in France. So the government of Michel Barnier has fallen. Whoever comes next, though, is probably going to have to rely on emergency legislation. Having said that, the reaction in markets is muted. The CAC market is actually up by 0.4%. We've got the OAT spread actually narrowing, and the Euro Fed steady 1.0526 up, but 10.1% against the US dollar, which is softer at 10.1%. 10-year US Treasury yield this morning trading at 4.2% ahead of the non-farm payrolls data tomorrow. Bitcoin surging again this morning. We are just shy of $103,000 up to parity, 100,000 yesterday, and US dollar futures on the rep this morning. There's the markets.
Turning top story of the day, French President Emmanuel Macron is this morning seeking a new Prime Minister after the government of Michel Barnier was toppled by a no-confidence vote. But whoever replaces Barnier will face the same difficulty in building support in the National Assembly and passing a budget that brings the country's budget deficit under control. Speaking ahead of the vote, Michel Barnier defended his plan, which contained 60 billion euros in tax hikes and spending cuts. His words are spoken by a translator.
I was and am proud to act to build rather than destroy, and that during this period I listened to all those who told me they were willing to work for the good of the country. Honorable members of Parliament, I cannot accept the idea that institutional destabilization could be the objective that would unite a majority of MPs here.
Barnier was ousted after a left-wing coalition teamed up with far-right leader Marine Le Pen's national rally to pass the no-confidence motion. She says now the decision on whether to resign from the presidency lies with Emmanuel Macron.
ne demande pas la démission.
I'm not calling for Emmanuel Macron to resign. I'm saying that there will come a time when, if we don't fix a path of respect for the voters, and respect for the political forces, and respect for the elections, so the pressure on the president will obviously get maintained. But he alone will have the decision for the last word.
Don't be shocked. Marine events speaking through a translator. The results of vote, while expected, pitches the country into a period of turbulence that is likely to further unsettle investors.
So that's our main top story this morning. We are live from London and Paris today with Bloomberg's Stephen Carroll there on the ground, who today, yesterday, is tracking what was happening in Parliament. And of course, as we expect Emmanuel Macron to speak to the French nation this evening, 8 p.m. Stephen's going to be joining us in the next part of Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. He has a guest, Georgina Wright, a senior fellow and deputy director of international studies at the Institut Montaigne, for some description on the political crisis. This is Bloomberg.
This is New York's only 24-hour source for world markets and breaking business news. Bloomberg 730. Coming up, the latest market-moving headlines from Bloomberg. First, an update from our partners at CBS News. CBS News Brief. The search is on for the killer who gunned down the CEO of United Healthcare in Manhattan. New York City Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch says it was likely a targeted attack.
Many people passed the suspect, but he appeared to wait for his intended target. The suspect fled, first on foot, then on an e-bike.
Two boys, ages 5 and 6, are in critical condition after they were shot at their small school in Palermo, California. Dale Orlando's child goes to that school.
We couldn't get a hold of our daughter. We didn't know she was okay. So, yeah, it was very traumatic.
Police say the shooter took his own life. In western Pennsylvania, the search for a grandmother who fell into a sinkhole is now a recovery operation.
We're virtually positive she's in the mine, and it's just a matter of trying to find her and do right by her family.
State Police Trooper Steve Lamani. CBS News Brief. I'm Uncle Wallace. Everything you love about Bloomberg Radio is now inside your car. The new Bloomberg Business app featuring Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. All of your favorite Bloomberg Radio shows right on your dashboard. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play.
This year, J.P. Morgan Asset Management was named #1 in keeping financial advisors best informed about the economy, about the markets, about new opportunities. And now, with our new guide to ETFs, we're keeping you best informed about how to invest in today's fastest-growing investment vehicle. Download our comprehensive new guide to ETFs at jpmorgan.com/ETF Insights, so you can be the best-informed financial partner for your clients. Robert, 2024 Fund Brand 50 Survey asks 100 plus fund selectors globally to write top suppliers and keep you best informed. Copyright 2024 J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, all rights reserved.
When I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on, and know we'll get through this.
Mom, we are so high up.
Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about Adopting a Teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Listen carefully. Can you hear the rhythm in the markets? Not just in the syncopations created by inflation, but in the preludes leading to global elections, the dissonance that moves the decay, and the rising course conducted by AI. It's music in the markets, and if you want to learn to listen for it, we'll show you how. Learn more at Bloomberg.com.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand, and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, a conversation with Anika Gupta at Wisdom Tree.
So while, U.S. consumers have been eroding their savings, European consumers have been hoarding their savings. And that remains a key question mark of, could we reach a point where the European consumer starts to spend, and that could be the new catalyst. However, what we're also seeing is, consumer confidence numbers across European consumers remain very weak. And so that catalyst is unlikely to be triggered or, yield any tailwinds for the European economy because
the confidence just isn't there. So unlike the US, where you continue to see very strong spending by the consumer and that's supporting the economy, it's a very different picture here, and it's unlikely to change until we see, some stability in the economic as well as the political front.
And when you're talking about the economic front, too, just the latest data on the Eurozone seeing inflation accelerating beyond when you're thinking about the ECB's 2% target, similar to obviously the Federal Reserve's goal as well. What does that mean for ECB cuts? Because looking at the swaps market, they're still anticipating that there's going to be more cuts at their next meeting in next month.
That's right. The inflation numbers, give out this impression that inflation is actually much higher. But beneath the surface, you are seeing weakness continue to creep in, and that will show in the following quarters, we will see inflation coming down further. And that continues to feed into the narrative that the ECB is likely to remain extremely dovish.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, it's 9:40. European markets are up 0.2%. Even in France, their gains coming through. The Cameron up to 22 points, up 0.3%, trading at 7,326 markets. Looking through the collapse of the government there in Paris, at least for now. In the UK, the FTSE 100 is down 6 points, up 0.1%. Europe then so far is on track for a 6th straight day of gains. We had a very positive session once again in the US with the S&P notching the 56th record of the year. Currently, US futures got a little lower by about 10% on the S&P 500 evenings there. NASDAQ futures also coming a little lower by 0.2%, but again after adding more than 1% yesterday on NASDAQ 100. In currencies, euro dollar trading at 105, the single currency is up 0.2%. For the strength as well, for the pound up 0.2% at 127. The US benchmark 10-year is looking 420. Yields are up 3 basis points. Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve talking about the need for caution given the relative strength or remarkable strength of the US economy. Brent trading at $72.68, WTI at 68.94, up 0.6%. OPEC Plus will be meeting later today. Bitcoin, another standout for these really across the asset classes, breaking through 100,000 for the first time, currently trading 102,000. Bitcoin up 5% so far in the session, up well over 100% year today. That's the end of the market at 9:41 in the City Money.
Tom, thank you. I'm Caroline here. Pretty time now for some of the other stories making news in the UK and around the world. A no confidence vote has brought down French government, pushing the country deeper into political impasse. President Emmanuel Macron is under pressure to appoint a new prime minister quickly, but any new leader will face the same financial squeeze that brought down Prime Minister Michel Barnier's administration. South Korea's ruling party is trying to prevent the president's impeachment by voting against the motion to initiate proceedings. The main opposition party is targeting Saturday for the parliamentary vote on the impeachment motion after President Yoon's short-lived attempt to impose martial law. And here in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer will announce new targets for fighting crime in Britain, including a named police officer to every neighbourhood in England and Wales. The government is aiming to add 13,000 police officers to reduce crime rates. Those are some of our global news headlines.
Let's go back to Paris now, and Stephen Carroll, who's standing by on Bloomberg Radio, of course, following the latest developments on the ground in the French capital. For us, Stephen, the government then resigning after yesterday's no confidence vote. How deep does this crisis look from your perspective there in the French capital?
Well, I think that we're into the political unknown now for at least the next few hours. Michel Barnier is still at the Elysee, by the way. We're still waiting for the actual official announcement that he has resigned the government from office after yesterday's no confidence vote. So that meeting's been lasting for about 45 minutes for now, and we know that Emmanuel Macron is going to be meeting the President of the National Assembly, who is a member of his party, and also the President of the Senate later on this afternoon as well, who's from the centre-right of their Republican Party. To this all ahead of a speech at 8 o'clock this evening French time to the country. Will that be the moment where he will announce the Prime Minister. That's part of the speculation, but of course Emmanuel Macron likes to surprise us, so we'll still wait and see what we might come up with between now and then. Plenty of politicians out this morning speaking, including the President of the National Assembly, Laurent Privé, talking about the need for a Prime Minister to be appointed quickly. She even thinks there's a chance they could get the budget passed by the end of the year if the process moves fast. I think that's a pretty optimistic take, but I wanted to think about what this means for France and for Europe more broadly as well. We've got Georgina Wright with us, who's a senior fellow and deputy director for international studies at the French think tank Institut Montaigne. Georgina, good morning. Great to have you with us on Bloomberg Radio. From your point of view, how serious a crisis is this for France and for the French economy?
I mean, it is a crisis, but in a way it's been sort of an ongoing crisis since July. So we had parliamentary elections, we had a very fractured parliament that came out of that, sort of no party with an absolute majority. Now you have the left-wing faction that say we were the big winners and we should have been able to appoint, have a prime minister from our grouping. And then you've got the far right who say, wait, well actually as a single party we're the most numerous and we should be the ones to have a prime minister. So we knew that Michel Barnier's government was volatile, that actually it might not last, a couple of years, and in a way that the budget was always going to be a real crunch point. So the crisis has really been ongoing since July.
Now, what sort of profile of person could have more success than the great negotiator Michel Barnier at trying to win support to pass the budget?
I think in a way, Macron probably thought that Michel Barnier was a good candidate. Here is someone who managed to broker an agreement among 27 countries for the UK's exit from the EU. Surely you can broker a budget or laws that will actually somehow be supported by a majority, even in a very fractured lower assembly. And actually that sort of calculation turned out to be wrong, because you've got parties there that say, we're big winners, or we have voters expect X, Y, and Z from us, and actually the current government with its budget but also its other laws is simply not putting forward laws that are in any way representative or kind of in line with what our voters expect. And that was always going to limit the backing that the government would get. But then there's also political manoeuvring here. The far right want to win next presidential election, so they want to make sure that they're not too closely associated with what the current government is doing. Likewise for the left-wing faction. So there's all sort of political repercussions here that go way beyond the ability to forge consensus.
I don't think it's unkind to say that prime ministers are sort of a disposable part of the French political scene. They're changed with alarming regularity, as often a political manoeuvre by the president. Is this a sign of weakness for Emmanuel Macron? He, of course, doesn't face end of term in 2027 and can't be forced at it.
You're right, he can't be forced out. Now, he can't, you have 2 terms, so the thing is about what does he want to try and achieve between now and 2027. He could, of course, choose to resign, but that's sort of very unlikely at this stage. He, I think, has a number of things that he wants to do. During his re-election campaign, he promised to do ambitious reforms, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on spending, and so he'll want to make sure that there is a prime minister who he can actually work with. But as the sort of last months have shown, it's one thing being able to have a good relationship with the president, but it's another to have the confidence of the parliament. And ultimately, the parliament, they are the ones that vote on legislation. And I think there is this, provision in the constitution which allows a government to force through legislation without a vote if necessary. But parliament here has just said we've had enough of that, and we won't hesitate to censure government and bring it down.
Do you think we'll look back on this moment and see it as the door opening to Marine Le Pen as the next president?
I mean, we've been saying that for years, so, who knows? What is absolutely clear is that the far right are doing very well, and in the last election, they did particularly well, and they could have done, better had the political kind of system, electoral system, been different to how the parliamentary elections work, is that we're in different constituencies, and the candidate who has the most votes gets the seat. But sometimes they don't have an outward majority, so there's a second round of voting. And here, what happens usually is if there is a
far-right candidate, then the sort of rest of the centrist parties will drop out to make sure that there's one centrist candidate versus one far-right. And in those sorts of situations, what usually happens is the centrist candidate gets through. But it's clear to everyone that the far-right is doing very, very well, and they absolutely want to get in 2027. But then so does the left-wing coalition. So I think it's too early to say at this point what will happen in 2027.
Okay, Georgina, thank you so much for your time this morning. That's Georgina Wright, Senior Fellow and Deputy Director for International Studies at the think tank Institute Montaigne. Great to get your analysis this morning. Karen, it's going to be a busy day ahead for French politics as well. And look, as Georgina was just telling us there, this is an extremely fractured political landscape. Everyone has their own ambitions. And whether those will play into what happens next, and whether a new Prime Minister can succeed when Michel Barnier fails.
Yeah, it certainly looks like a messy situation. Stephen Carroll, thank you so much for being with us live from Paris throughout the morning today. And the question also is how much like austerity will it look in France in the next 12 to 18 months if the decisions around the budget are going to be made by these special laws. We shall see. We'll have more from Paris throughout the programme, and coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak here, we'll be looking at the London rush, just tracking some of the companies and businesses making announcements here in London. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
Get the latest business news uninterrupted on your daily commute. Listen to Bloomberg Radio on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Download the Bloomberg Business app on your smartphone now. Then listen no matter where you are. From coast to coast, get live radio, podcasts, and on-demand news updates. Plus, exciting details of your favorite shows at your fingertips anywhere across the globe. The Bloomberg Business app, now on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play.
Life is full of moments, from first steps, first loves, moments that make life special. But life can also bring us difficult and disruptive moments like a cancer diagnosis, which is why the groundbreaking work of Stand Up to Cancer is so vital. They know the problem of cancer won't be solved by one doctor, one lab, or one hospital. It takes collaboration. That's why Stand Up to Cancer brings together top minds from different fields to find new and better treatments so patients can thrive. So when it matters, we can all show up for moments of a lifetime. Please join Stand Up to Cancer and Myrtle Beach to help families get back to where they belong, making new memories for years to come. Go to standuptocancer.org to see how you can join the mission.
Influential Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Francine Lacroix.
Hello, I'm Nick, energy investor, fund manager. Maria, thank you for joining us. It seems like political turmoil, or certainly political instability, uncertainty, can kind of come out of nowhere. Absolutely. I think, what we've observed in Korea this morning was pretty expected. We've seen markets reacting to that in quite a very passionate, I would say. I think they are, managing volatility in a sensible way. We haven't seen really panic in Korean assets at large. Nonetheless, we are facing quite an important political crisis, so we will have to watch carefully how things develop in the coming days. We struggle to understand exactly why martial law was abolished, so that it's quite difficult to understand if the first intent of the president will there be a long-term lasting impact on assets of South Korea. So I think that's a very important question for markets to wait upon. And I think what we can say and what we have observed is that there has been in Korean equities in general, already quite a lot of weight in terms of market confidence not being very strong. We've seen the market underperforming quite significantly other markets this year. We've continued to see valuations being very cheap on a relative standpoint, given some of the quality of the companies within the index.
Hear more conversations like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television and the Bloomberg Business app. This is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, it's 9:53 here in the city of London. The European stocks are posting gains of 0.2% on track for a sixth straight day of gains for European equities. French stocks are doing well despite the collapse of government there, question marks over who the next premier will be, even of the President Macron will be speaking at 8 p.m. This evening. French stocks are up 2/10 of 8%. Here in the UK, the FTSE 100 added just 4 points at 8,340. As we look ahead to the US Open later today, S&P is currently pointing just shy of a 10% after notching a 56 record high yesterday. Nasdaq 100 futures pointed lower by 10%, but that's after a rally yesterday of a little over 1%, led by the magnificent 7 tech stocks. In your currencies, euro dollar trading 105, up nearly 2% in single currency, so recovering some of the losses of earlier this week. The pound is also seeing a bit of upside, up 10%, trading 127 versus the US dollar. Talking of the US, the benchmark US Treasury, the 10-year is yielding 420, yields are up 2 basis points. The Fed chair has talked about the remarkable strength of the US economy and said officials to be cautious into the next steps on lower rates. Brent trading at $72.63. WTI is still comfortably below $70, about $68.89, up 5% in the session. OPEC Plus will be meeting later today. And Bitcoin breaking through $100,000 for the first time on record, up 5% in the session today, trading at $102,000 per Bitcoin. That's checking the markets at 9:54 here at City London.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you so much, Tom, for that. Now, let's think about what is moving markets. With the London rush, where we carve out a moment to highlight businesses making announcements in the capital journey tonight as we look at this move. Louise, actually, it's quite surprising in some ways that the European stocks are doing fairly well. The French stocks are doing well too. In the UK, though, the FTSE 100 is sort of slightly lagging. What's grabbed your attention today?
So one of the key stories this morning is Frasers and also the wider kind of retail space. So Frasers Group obviously owns a whole host of outlets, so Sports Direct, House of Fraser, Evans Cycles and a whole list of other ones. They've cut their guidance for their full year adjusted pre-tax profit to as much as about £600. It was at about, £600 million. It was at 625 million, so quite a significant cut. That's on the back of their first half earnings. Their revenue dropped more than 8%. And essentially they're blaming the budget, the Labour's budget, and the drop in consumer confidence around that. They said the budget will cost £50 million, and there was some really good quotes from the CEO in an interview with Bloomberg this morning. He said, and I quote, "The skullduggery around the budget is mind-blowing. It's not only just increased costs, but it's also destroyed consumer confidence." So some quite punchy comments from him, not destroying, exactly, yeah. And Bloomberg Intelligence actually had a note out, I think a few days ago, saying that Frasers has been very vocal about a lot of other companies recently, that they hold stakes into Boohoo, Mulberry in particular. And BI was saying that they really needed to prove themselves with these results and show that they've got their own strengths while they're kind of going after other companies. So essentially, I mean, they haven't really done that this morning. Their shares are down 14%.
Yeah, I mean, we have to also put this into context that obviously the majority owner of Frasers is Mike Ashley, who himself is considered a very sort of colourful character in terms of UK business, so I'm not surprised that they can see some interesting family skullduggery. Yes,
This is big in the telecom space, so an approval of the merger now between Vodafone and Three, £15 billion. It's really significant. I'm going to be speaking to the CEO in about 30 minutes' time. What do we know at this point?
So the moment we know is this is a £15 billion merger, and it's been under approval by the regulators of the CMA for, I think, about 18 months, so a long time. It's merging two of the UK's 4 telecom providers, so Vodafone and Three UK, so that's owned by a Hong Kong listed company. So it's going to create the UK's biggest mobile phone company, and they have, this has been approved essentially with a caveat that they have to invest £11 billion into upgrading the networks, so that's in 5G. So Vodafone CEO has quite a nice comment. She said that there's a power of the UK to the forefront of European telecoms, so hopefully we'll be getting some better signal.
Yeah, do you think outside? We knew that there's still parts of the UK that don't have strong signal, which is quite crazy when you think about it. Yeah, the UK's not that big of a place.
Prices will be under the steel prices caps for 3 years. I guess the question is, and it's a question I'll be putting to the CEO, is whether or not beyond that 3-year period, are we looking ultimately at higher mobile prices?
That was the main worry, wasn't it? Yeah.
And in Europe, and also post the UK leaving the European Union, there's been that issue. And let's also think about Shell and Equinor and North Sea assets that they're combining.
Yes, they're combining their UK offshore oil and gas assets to form a new company, and they say that will create the North Sea's biggest independent producer, really. So obviously 2 huge names, but what it kind of reflects, as we've been reporting on this morning, is the declining
status of the UK's offshore oil and gas industry, so production being decreasing and they're combining their assets and then also at the same time kind of shifting their focus to more attractive investment opportunities. So it's just showing that shifting market. It's going to be jointly owned by the two of them, and they say that this is also kind of sustained domestic production.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got record oil production out of the US, got an OPEC Plus meeting today. But yes, very interesting to pause a moment on North Sea production. Louise, thank you so much for being with me. I'm going to listen with interest to your Vodafone interview, Tom McKenzie. Thank you very much. And thank you for being with me this hour. We've had a very interesting programme with our own Stephen Carroll live in Paris for us throughout the morning. Louise moved there with the London Rush. Just thinking about what's coming up in the next hour. Final with a brief with Danny Berger and Max Craig up next after this look at the US and elsewhere through their daybreak starts. But right now, that's next. Exodus, this is Bloomberg.
Live from the financial capital of the world, broadcasting across the globe, this is WBDR New York, Bloomberg 1130.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, December 5th. Coming up today.
Searches for a new prime minister after a no-confidence motion passes.
South Korea's main opposition leader says it may be difficult to impeach the president.
The search is still on in New York for a gunman who killed a healthcare CEO.
And Bitcoin does it, topping $100,000.
Supreme Court justices heard arguments about health care for transgender teens. Plus, 3 months after Hurricane Helene, some people in Florida are still without power. I want to talk more ahead.
Just national sports, the Nets beat the Pacers, upset at college basketball, the Packers and Lions play tonight.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 92.9 Boston. Sirius XM, Channel 121. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and the Bloomberg Business app.
I'm here in Moscow.
I'm Nathan Baker. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of their thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today.
Nathan, S&P futures are a little changed this morning. So are Dow futures. NASDAQ futures down 0.1%, down about 27 points, and the 10-year Treasury down 8/32, the 4.21%. Nathan.
Here we begin with the political crisis in France. President Emmanuel Macron is searching for a new prime minister. It's after the far right joined forces with the left on a no-confidence motion against Michel Barnier in a dispute over the budget. Bloomberg's pretty good that has more from Paris.
This is uncharted territory. This has never happened in modern history, really, that we need to go to not only a caretaker prime minister, but one that can't actually pass a budget through. So they're going to do a French constitutional thing called the loi spéciale. Basically, is an amendment to the Constitution brought into 2001 that says, just in case the Parliament can't come to some sort of agreement, which clearly they cannot, they will take over the budget and from 2024 and move it into 2025. But there's some real hard economic effects when it comes to that.
Bloomberg's pretty good. This says the French finance minister has warned stopgap legislation will mean higher taxes and block spending increases to priorities like security and farming. President Macron plans to address the nation at 8 o'clock tonight in Paris. That is 2 p.m. Wall Street time.
Meanwhile, Nathan, a political crisis continues to unfold in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol is facing an impeachment motion from the opposition Democratic Party and 5 others after he briefly declared martial law this week. The Democratic leader Lee Jae-myung says getting rid of President Yoon could be difficult.
Ultimately, politics are done by the people. And even if the result of the vote may go against the will of the people in the current situation, the vote result may change next time if individual members of the parliament are pressured heavily by public opinion. That's what I think.
Opposition leader Lee Jae-myung spoke to Bloomberg through an interpreter. His party holds a majority, but he needs at least 8 votes from President Yoon's party to move the impeachment motion forward.
Well, back in New York, Karen, the search is still on for the gunman who killed the leader of one of the largest U.S. health insurance companies on a Manhattan sidewalk. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us with the very latest. John.
And Nathan, ABC News and the New York Post cite police sources as saying bullet casings recovered at the scene have writing on it, including the words deny, defend, and oppose. There's nothing random about this attack. Police say United Health Group executive Brian Thompson was targeted, and the shooting was planned ahead of time. Chief of Detectives Joe Kennedy.
The shooter steps onto the sidewalk from behind the car. He ignores numerous other pedestrians, approaches the victim from behind, and shoots him in the back. The shooter then walks toward the victim and continues to shoot.
Surveillance video shows the shooter using a handgun with what appears to be a silencer. At one point, the gun jams, but without missing a beat. He clears the barrel and fires again. He then runs through an alley, jumps on an e-bike, and flees into Central Park. The best image is actually from a nearby Starbucks, where the government discarded a bottle of 2 energy bar wrappers. The police also recovered one piece cell phone. Well, Thompson's widow tells NBC News her husband had received threats. United Health ranks highest when it comes to the percentage of claims denied, nearly twice the industry average. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Well, another major story that we're following this morning, Bitcoin, it's finally done it. It topped the $100,000 level. It was fueled in part by President-elect Donald Trump picking a crypto proponent to be the next head of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Trump selected Paul Atkins to replace outgoing SEC Chair Gary Gensler. Nathan Dean, senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, says Atkins will bring significant change.
This is the first time that they've really had somebody in the regulatory repertoire, if you will, that's going to be thinking of the crypto world. And so, Commissioner Atkins, because he used to be a commissioner at the SEC, he has actually come out and has done a lot of work in the crypto space.
Now, Bloomberg Intelligence's Nathan Dean says the crypto market has jumped by roughly $1.3 trillion since Trump's election victory. Right now, Bitcoin trading at $102,600.
Well, Karen, Trump's pick for defense secretary is fighting to hold on to his cabinet nomination. Pete Hegseth met with legislators on Capitol Hill, conducted a radio interview, and released an opinion article denying allegations of sexual assault and excessive drinking. Hegseth also spoke to reporters on Capitol Hill, indicating he will keep fighting. Pete Hegseth's margin for confirmation is narrow. He can lose no more than 3 Republicans on a Senate confirmation vote, assuming Democrats unite against him.
Meanwhile, Elon Musk is heading to the Capitol later today to stoke congressional enthusiasm for his effort to slash at least $2 trillion from the federal budget. Musk and his partner in the initiative, former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, plan to meet with groups of lawmakers. Musk, the world's richest person, has relentlessly promoted what he styled as the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, a reference to cryptocurrency Dogecoin that he periodically promotes.
Well, Karen, the world's second richest person, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, says he is optimistic about President-elect Trump's second term. He's expressing some excitement about potential regulatory cutbacks. More on that from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
His remarks came during a wide-ranging interview at the New York Times Dealbook Summit in New York. He said, quote, "I'm actually very optimistic this time around.
I'm very hopeful about this. It's a lot of energy around reducing regulation. And from my point of view, if I can help him do that, I'm going to help him."
The comments follow an October decision by Bezos to prohibit the Washington Post, which he owns, from endorsing a presidential candidate, a move that led to tens of thousands of people canceling their subscriptions. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Charlie, thank you. Well, Bezos is not the only executive who's positive on the next Trump presidency. A new poll by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants finds 2/3 of business executives say they're confident about the economic outlook for the year ahead. That's up from 26% in a survey conducted in August and 43% a year earlier.
Turning to markets now, Karen, stocks enter today's session at all-time highs. Once again, a rally in big tech drove the S&P 500 to its 56th closing record of 2024. Gains were fueled by positive comments on the economy from Fed Chair Jay Powell.
The economy is strong, and it's stronger than we thought it was going to be in September. So the labor market is better, and the downside risks appear to be less in the labor market. Growth is definitely stronger than we thought.
Jay Powell spoke at the New York Times Dealbook Summit. The Fed makes its final rate decision of 2024 on December 18th.
Meanwhile, Nathan, St. Louis Fed President Alberto Musillam says it may be appropriate to pause interest rate cuts at the next meeting. However, he says incoming data will guide his decision.
I think we all have